Emmanuel Macron must be panicking as of today. More and more pundits are openly admitting that the coronavirus is indeed leading to a new wave of support for a Frexit from the EU, a French version of Brexit. We're going to take a look at a bit of the history behind the push for Frexit and why it's increasingly becoming apparent that Frexit is a very real consequence of this pandemic. You're going to absolutely love it. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. I certainly hope you're all doing well, safe and sound on this lovely lockdown Saturday. If this is your first time here at this channel, we post 2 videos a day analyzing current events and some super awesome conservative trends so that you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have as a regular part of this channel. You're going to love interacting with this online community of conservatives from all over the world. And finally, if the coronavirus has turned your financial life upside down and you need help to sort out your choices to get you back on track, our good friends over at Noble Gold are here to help you. Their team has helped hundreds of families through this crisis, and they can guide you back to safety and give you ideas of how to get there. Now remember, when you need a financial friend, Noble Gold will always be there for you. Give them a call at 877-646-5347. That's 877-646-5347. Or you simply hit the link down below and get their free investor's guide. Tell them Dr. Steve sent you. You'll be glad that you did. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. So John Keeger over at The Spectator has a fascinating article on whether the coronavirus will ultimately lead to a Frexit, the French version of Brexit. What he's noticing here is that the coronavirus is currently provoking a course of taking back control across the political spectrum in France. And this is because the epidemic is laying bare some of France's dependence on outside states for essentials such as masks and medicines and test kits and ventilators. Even Macron has been found sounding the nationalist alarms, saying that the French will have to be far more independent and less reliant on Europe as a whole in the future. It's time for the French to begin taking care of the French. I mean, gang, this is Macron. This is France's first talk coming from the king of the European Union, right? When he starts sounding like Marine Le Pen, you know, you know something's going on here. Something's really happening here. Now, the other dynamic that's propelling this movement towards an eventual Frexit is a growing irritation with the European Union among the French population. The fact that Italy had to turn to China to get face masks and equipment because Germany and France placed embargoes on exporting protective medical equipment was an embarrassment for the French, to say at least. And the European Council's decision to refuse alleviating some of the debt obligations of Italy during this time, that's also rattled a number of French, let alone other European national populations. Brussels really is coming across as a bit of a bully throughout this entire process, shall we say. And the lack of European unity is putting the Union in grave danger. That's actually coming from the 94-year-old former president of the European Commission, Jacques Delors. He sees the Union as more fragile now than it's ever been. And so all of this has contributed to the return of the notion of Frexit in the hearts and minds of many French voters. Talk of Frexit had died down a little bit after the 2017 election with Marine Le Pen, then National Front, now National Rally. She was defeated by Macron, but she had promised a Frexit referendum. She had won, whereas Macron was dead set against it. And yet, even back then, just a few months after he was elected, as Europe was turning more and more to the nationalist populist right, Macron admitted in an interview that if a referendum were allowed, the French public would most likely vote to leave the European Union. It was during an interview with the Scottish political commentator Andrew Marr on the BBC, and Macron ended up really sending shockwaves throughout the Eurozone by admitting that had France held a referendum on membership of the EU similar to that of the Brexit, he thought the French people probably would have voted to leave. Macron admitted in effect that he understood why so many wanted to leave, that globalization was not for everyone. He knew that the kind of economy that globalization fabricates simply doesn't benefit everyone. And this is because, as we've talked about in a number of other videos, globalization involves a global division of labor that ships manufacturing jobs away to the global south, while finance and ownership of capital coalesces around the bankers and corporate executives in the West, the global North. And so as a result, the last few decades have been characterized by a mass exodus of industrial and manufacturing jobs away from the United States and Western Europe into these so-called third world or global South nations like Mexico and China. I mean, this utterly devastated the United States. Here in the States alone, we lost some 60,000 factories over the last 15 years prior to the Trump presidency. And of course, that's what Trump promised to reverse. He promised to bring back manufacturing and industry through his economic nationalism, which I think was key to him winning the presidency. So Macron said that the same things were happening in France. And he believed that a lot of the losers, as it were, of globalization suddenly decided that the Eurozone was no more for them. They had it. And they wanted to restore some democratic integrity to their nation so as to take more control over their own lives and affairs. And then when pushed as to whether France, if it were to have the same referendum as Britain did, would we see the same result, Macron admitted, yes, most probably yes, we would. And now that Brexit has finally happened, it's finally been implemented and is doing well, it appears clear that other nations are starting to take a second look at Brussels and questioning as to whether they want to stick around with the Union. And clearly France is one of those nations, certainly Italy as well, both of which are now questioning whether it's worth it or not to be ruled by a bunch of bullies in Brussels. Research from Edinburgh University has recently shown that 53% of French would like to hold their own vote on EU membership. And we're seeing similar numbers in Spain, Germany, Sweden, where more and more people are in favor of holding a referendum than those who opposed such an idea. Now, this, of course, was before the coronavirus. And this research did find that a referendum to leave the EU would in fact pass in France, even though other polls indicate that those in favor of staying would prevail. So the polling in all of this seems to reflect the kind of uncertainty and instability that characterized the polling leading up to the Brexit, that had those in favor staying polling better than those who wanted to leave. But regardless of the pollsters, there is a general sentiment that more and more nations are ready to exit the Eurozone. Even the prince of secular globalism, George Soros, has admitted that Brexit has basically opened the floodgates for other anti-European forces to ascend to the foreground of national politics. And he predicted that France and the Netherlands would be the next nations to leave the disintegrating union. And again, we have to remember that this was all before the virus exposed some major weaknesses and fault lines in the EU. Europe, for all practical purposes right now, Europe has obliterated the Schengen agreement that allows the free flow of travel among member nations in the Union. Heck, you can't even freely travel to the grocery store if you're 65 years old or older in some places, for heaven's sake. So the Schengen agreement has basically been suspended. Nations have closed their borders. They're relying more and more on their own manufacturing base in-house. Migration has been almost completely halted, though I know there's still some migration funny business going on in Germany, apparently. The European Union, in many respects, has been closed down due to the virus. Every nation is handling it in their own unique, peculiar way. And it's only natural that various European populations would start reconsidering the whole notion of the EU and whether they would have a more prosperous and flourishing future without it. So we'll obviously be keeping our eyes on things here, but given that the nationalist populist currents that were already operative before the virus pandemic, propelling nations away from the kinds of globalized centralization represented in Brussels, I think we can expect that this pandemic has only exacerbated those anti-globalist dynamics for the foreseeable future. Now, before you go, you definitely want to check out the video I just uploaded on a new poll that just came out showing that 15% of Bernie Sanders supporters are saying they will definitely be voting for President Trump over Biden come November. I think you're going to absolutely love it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.